Sir, stop. Why are you in this neighborhood? I need your ID.
I live here. I'm walking my dog in front of my house. What crime do you suspect?
We got a suspicious person call. Don't make this difficult.
Suspicious for walking a Labrador or for being black? Say it on your camera.
Unit 14 requesting backup. Uncooperative male.
You're escalating without...
The body camera on Officer Kyle Bennett's chest was recording in crystal clear, high definition. Every word, every expression, every moment of what was about to become the most expensive dog walk in the history of the Oakwood Heights Police Department. I wasn't running. I wasn't hiding anything. I wasn't doing anything except standing in front of my own home with my dog sitting calmly beside me. I am Dr. Marcus Sterling, 48 years old, the principal of one of the highest performing public high schools in Georgia, a respected educator with a doctorate in educational leadership, and a man who had just spent the last 2 weeks leading a district-wide initiative on diversity and inclusion. And now I was about to be arrested in my own neighborhood for the crime of existing while black. Before I continue with my story, take a moment to reflect on your own neighborhood. If you believe a man should be able to walk down his own street without being interrogated, pay close attention. This body camera footage is going to frustrate you. I had lived in the Oakwood Heights neighborhood for 8 years. It was a quiet, suburban area just outside of Atlanta. Tree lines with mature pines created canopies of shade. Well-maintained homes with manicured lawns, top-tier schools, the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors and kids played basketball in the driveways. I had worked incredibly hard to afford a home here. I earned my bachelor's degree while working full-time as a warehouse manager. I got my master's degree while raising 2 sons as a single father. I completed my doctorate in educational leadership while working as a vice principal, writing my dissertation during stolen moments between administrative hearings. Now I was the principal of Liberty High School, a position I had held for 4 years. Under my leadership, the school's college acceptance rate had increased by 15%. The achievement gap between different demographic groups had narrowed significantly. I made a good salary, I paid my mortgage on time, I was an active member of the community, serving on the Homeowners Association board. That Tuesday afternoon, I had taken the day off work for a routine dental appointment, just a cleaning, nothing serious. I drove home around 2:30 p.m., changed into a comfortable hoodie and sweatpants, and decided to take my dog Max for a walk. Max was a 7-year-old Labrador mix I had adopted from a local rescue. Friendly, well-trained, the kind of dog that wanted to be best friends with everyone he met. I walked Max around the block, the same route we took every single day. We had just turned onto our own street and were approaching my driveway when the patrol car pulled up. Officer Kyle Bennett stepped out of his vehicle. He was 27 years old, 2 years on the force, and he had just received a call about a suspicious individual in the area. The call had come from a neighbor 2 streets over. The neighbor had reported seeing a black male walking through the neighborhood who didn't look like he belonged there. That was the entire report, a black man who didn't look like he belonged. Bennett had responded to the call. When he saw me walking my dog, he decided I must be the suspicious person. "Sir, can you stop for a moment?" I stopped and turned around. Max sat down beside me, panting happily. "Yes, officer, is everything okay? What are you doing in this neighborhood?" The question hit me like a slap to the face. It wasn't the first time I had heard this question. Not the first time someone had implied I didn't belong in the place I called home. I kept my voice deep, calm, and level. "I live here. I'm walking my dog. This is Max. We take this same walk every day." Bennett looked at me, then at the large colonial-style houses around us, then back at me. "You live in this neighborhood, in one of these houses?" "Assam." "Yes, officer. That's my house right there. The brick one with the charcoal shutters. You can see my SUV in the driveway. Do you have any identification that proves you live there? I felt that familiar tightness in my chest. Why do I need identification to walk my dog on my own street? I'm standing in front of my own house on a public sidewalk. What law requires me to show you ID for that? We've had reports of suspicious activity in the area. I looked down at Max, who was sniffing the grass. Suspicious activity, like walking a lazy Labrador in broad daylight. What exactly is suspicious about what I'm doing right now? I just need to verify your identity, sir, and I need you to tell me what law I violated that requires me to show you identification. I haven't committed a crime. I'm walking on a public sidewalk in the state of Georgia. I'm not required to identify myself unless you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a specific crime. So what's your reasonable suspicion? Have you ever been stopped in your own driveway for no valid reason? Think about that for a second. Bennett's hand moved to rest on his duty belt. It's standard procedure when we receive calls about a suspicious person. No, it's not. You need reasonable suspicion that I've committed a crime. Walking a dog doesn't meet that standard. So what specific crime do you suspect me of committing? Sir, you're making this more difficult than it needs to be. I'm asserting my constitutional rights. That's not difficult. That's what we teach students in civics class. The Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. You're detaining me right now. You need legal justification for that. Bennett took a step closer. The body camera captured his movement, captured me. Standing my ground, captured Max, looking between us. What's your name? Bennett asked, his voice taking on a harder edge. I don't have to tell you my name without reasonable suspicion of a crime. Refusing to identify myself isn't obstruction unless there's an underlying offense. Refusing to cooperate can be considered obstruction. No, officer, it can't. I'm only required to provide identification if you have reasonable suspicion that I've committed a specific crime. You haven't articulated any such suspicion. This is basic constitutional law. I received a report of a suspicious person in this neighborhood. Based on what specific information, what did this supposedly suspicious person do? Bennett hesitated. The body camera captured the pause. The caller reported seeing someone who didn't appear to belong in the neighborhood. I let those words hang in the humid air. I wanted them recorded. Didn't appear to belong. And what about me makes you think I don't belong here, officer? What criteria are you using to determine who belongs and who doesn't? I didn't say you don't belong, but that's what the call said, isn't it? Someone saw me and decided I didn't look like I belonged here. So let me ask you directly. If I were white, would we be having this conversation right now? Sir, I'm just responding to a call from a concerned citizen. A concerned citizen who called the police on a man walking a dog. What was the concern exactly? Was I threatening anyone? Was I trespassing? Or was the concern simply that I'm a black man in a predominantly white neighborhood? Bennett's face flushed red. The body camera captured it clearly. This isn't about race, sir. Then what is it about? Because I'm doing exactly what white residents in this neighborhood do every day. Walking their dogs, checking their mail, washing their cars, and nobody calls the police on them. But I do the exact same things, and I get the police called on me. I'm just doing my job, responding to calls. Your job is to investigate actual crimes, not to harass law-abiding citizens because someone had a biased reaction to seeing them. I pay property taxes here. I contribute to this community as an educator. I serve on the HOA board. I have lived here for 8 years, and I shouldn't have to justify my existence to you. Bennett reached for his radio. The body camera captured the movement. This is Unit 14. I need backup at Oakwood Drive and Sycamore. Uncooperative individual. My eyes widened. You're calling backup because a man is walking his dog and declining to show ID when you have no legal basis to demand it. You're refusing to cooperate. That's escalating this situation. I'm asserting my constitutional rights. You're the one escalating by calling backup when there is no emergency, no crime, and no threat. Sir, I need you to calm down. I am calm. I'm also correct. And you calling for backup proves this was never about suspicious activity. This is about a black man in a suburban neighborhood having the audacity to assert his rights. 2 minutes later, another patrol car pulled up. Officer Sarah Jenkins stepped out. Jenkins was a 15-year veteran, 45 years old, and she had worked in this precinct for a decade. "What's the situation, Bennett?" Jenkins asked. "This man is refusing to provide identification. We had a suspicious person call. He's being uncooperative." Jenkins looked at me carefully. She took in my hoodie, the Labrador sitting patiently, the brick house behind me. Then her eyes widened in recognition. "Dr. Sterling." I nodded, relief washing over me, but doing little to quell the anger. "Officer Jenkins, yes, it's good to see you again." Jenkins turned to Bennett, and there was something sharp in her expression. "This is Dr. Marcus Sterling. He's the principal at Liberty High School. He's lived in that house for 8 years. I've attended school board meetings where he spoke." Bennett's face had gone pale. "You know him? Everyone in this community knows him. He's on the HOA board. He organizes the annual charity drive. What is this call about?" I spoke before Bennett could answer. Officer Bennett received a call about a suspicious person. He saw me walking my dog and decided I must be that person. He demanded ID, even though I explained, "I live here and haven't committed any crime." When I declined and asserted my Fourth Amendment rights, he called me uncooperative and called for backup. All of this is on his body camera. Jenkins looked at Bennett. Her voice had an edge now. "Did you verify his address before demanding identification? Instead of demanding ID, did you ask basic questions? Did you ask which house he lived in and try to verify it?" He wouldn't cooperate. Jenkins pulled out her radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 22. Cancel that backup request for Oakwood and Sycamore. Situation is resolved." She turned to me. "Dr. Sterling, I apologize for this situation. This should not have happened." "You're right. It shouldn't have. But this isn't the first time it's happened to me in this neighborhood." "What do you mean?" "This is the 4th time I've been stopped or questioned here since I moved in. The first time was 3 months after I moved in. I was checking my mailbox. A patrol car pulled up, and an officer asked what I was doing. The second time was a year later. I was taking out my recycling bins. Another officer questioned me. The third time was 2 years ago. I was getting into my own SUV in my own driveway, and an officer asked if the vehicle belonged to me. I filed a formal complaint about that one. And now this, the 4th time in 8 years. Jenkins' expression grew more serious. "Did you file reports on all of these?" "The first 2 times I didn't. I didn't want to cause problems. The third time, I filed a formal complaint. I never heard back. Nothing changed. So this time, I'm not letting it go." Bennett finally spoke, his voice quieter. "Sir, if there was a misunderstanding, I apologize." I looked directly at him, then at his body camera. "This wasn't a misunderstanding. Your body camera recorded everything from the moment you asked me what I was doing in this neighborhood to demanding ID without reasonable suspicion to calling me uncooperative to calling for backup. All documented. So no, I don't accept your apology. I need your department to do better." Jenkins pulled Bennett aside. They walked a few steps away, but the body camera still captured their quiet conversation. "Do you understand who you just detained?" Jenkins asked, her voice low but firm. "I do now. He's been the principal at Liberty for 4 years. He's won the State Educator of the Year award. He's respected throughout this county. He's lived here longer than you've been a police officer, and you just treated him like a criminal on his own street because someone made a biased phone call. I have to respond to calls. You have to use judgment. You could have driven by and observed. You could have approached politely. You could have asked if he lived here and taken his word for it. You had a dozen options that didn't involve demanding ID and calling backup. While they talked, I pulled out my phone. I was typing rapidly. "Dr. Sterling," Jenkins said, walking back to me, "I sincerely apologize." I looked up from my phone. "I'm emailing my attorney right now. I'm requesting all body camera footage from this encounter. I'm filing formal complaints with your department, with the county, with the state attorney general's office, and with the Department of Justice. I'm also contacting the NAACP because this isn't just about me. This is about systemic racial profiling." "That's your right," Jenkins said, "and I think you should pursue every avenue available. This needs to be addressed." Jenkins looked at Bennett. "You're going to be placed on administrative duty. Return to the station and report to the watch commander immediately." Bennett nodded and walked back to his patrol car. I looked down at Max. "Come on, boy, let's go home." I walked the remaining distance to my house, unlocked my front door, and went inside. I closed the door and leaned against it, my hands trembling now, not from fear, but from rage, from the exhaustion of 8 years of proving I had the right to exist in my own neighborhood. I took several deep breaths, then called my attorney. The lawsuit was filed 6 weeks later, 52 pages meticulously documented with citations and references to specific timestamps in the body camera footage. The lawsuit alleged unlawful detention, racial profiling violation of Fourth Amendment rights, violation of 14th Amendment equal protection rights, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. It named Officer Kyle Bennett individually. It named the Oakwood Heights Police Department. It named the county. It demanded $1,800,000 in damages. The county attorney's office reviewed the body camera footage. They watched Bennett approach me. They watched him demand ID without reasonable suspicion. They watched him call for backup when I asserted my rights. They watched the entire interaction. Then they reviewed the 3 previous incidents I had mentioned, footage they had never examined when I filed my earlier complaint, footage that showed a clear pattern. They called an emergency meeting with the police chief and the county executive. "This is a nightmare," the county attorney said. "We have a decorated educator being harassed in his own neighborhood repeatedly. We have documented evidence. We have a clear pattern of racial profiling, and we ignored his previous complaint." The police chief watched the footage again. "This is indefensible." The county executive agreed. "We settle fast and we make changes." But before settlement negotiations could begin, I held a press conference. I stood on the courthouse steps with my attorney and representatives from the ACLU. I told my story calmly and clearly. I showed clips from the body camera footage. I explained this wasn't an isolated incident, but a pattern. The press conference was covered by local news, then regional, then national. The body camera footage went viral. Within 48 hours, it had been viewed over 12 million times. Within a week, over 40 million views. People across the country shared their own stories of being profiled in their own neighborhoods. The Oakwood Heights Police Department opened an internal investigation. They reviewed not just Bennett's conduct, but the department's response to my previous complaints. The investigation took 9 weeks. The findings were devastating. Bennett had failed to use reasonable judgment. He had escalated unnecessarily. He had demonstrated bias in his approach and language. But worse, the department had failed to properly investigate my previous complaints. They had dismissed my concerns without reviewing evidence. They had allowed a pattern to continue unchecked. Officer Kyle Bennett was terminated 12 weeks after the incident. The termination letter cited multiple violations: unlawful detention, bias-based policing, failure to use appropriate judgment and conduct, unbecoming an officer. The two supervisors who had dismissed my previous complaints were also disciplined. One was demoted, one was suspended without pay for 30 days. The Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened an investigation into the Oakwood Heights Police Department. They found patterns of disparate treatment based on race in stops detentions and use of force. The department entered into a consent decree requiring comprehensive reforms, mandatory bias training, community oversight data collection on all stops, regular review of body camera footage, and federal monitoring for 5 years. My lawsuit went to mediation 14 months after the incident. The county's opening offer was $600,000. My attorney countered with $2 million. We settled for $1,650,000. I donated $300,000 to organizations working on criminal justice reform and racial equity. I used the rest to establish a scholarship fund for young black men pursuing careers in education. Kyle Bennett never worked in law enforcement again. He moved to a different state and took a job in logistics. He gave one interview to a local blog claiming he had been following protocol and that he was a victim of cancel culture. The body camera footage became required viewing at police academies across Georgia. Law schools used it to teach about Fourth Amendment rights and racial profiling. Community organizations used it in Know Your Rights workshops. One dog walk led to $1 million settlement, a terminated career, multiple disciplinary actions, and a federal consent decree. I continued as principal of Liberty High School. I continued my work on diversity and inclusion. I continued living in my brick house with the charcoal shutters, but I installed security cameras around my property. I started carrying my phone with the recording app ready every time I left my house. I joined advocacy organizations, working on police reform. In interviews, I have said that what happened to me is a daily reality for Black Americans being questioned in spaces where we live and work, being told we don't belong in places we've earned the right to occupy, being treated as suspicious for simply existing. That's why I fought back. That's why I made the footage public. That's why I donated to organizations working for change. Because individual accountability matters, but systemic reform is what creates lasting change. The body camera footage is still online. You can watch it yourself. You can see a high school principal calmly explaining his constitutional rights while being unlawfully detained for walking his dog in front of his own house. You can see what racial profiling looks like when documented clearly. You can see the moment when Officer Jenkins recognizes me and realizes the mistake. You can see what happens when someone refuses to accept being treated as suspicious. This story matters because I did everything society tells you to do. I got an education, not just a bachelor's, but a master's and a doctorate. I worked hard. I achieved professional success. I bought a home in a safe neighborhood. I contributed to my community. I was financially stable and law-abiding, and none of it protected me from being stopped by police for walking my dog in front of my own house. None of it prevented neighbors from viewing me as suspicious. None of it guaranteed basic dignity and respect. I still had to prove I belonged in a neighborhood where I'd lived for 8 years. I still had to assert my constitutional rights while standing on my own street. I still had to endure the humiliation of being detained in front of my neighbors. This story shows that achievement doesn't protect you from racism. Success doesn't make you immune to bias. A doctorate doesn't prevent someone from calling the police because they don't think you belong. But this story also shows that when violations are documented, When people refuse to stay silent, when evidence is undeniable, accountability is possible. Change can happen. Not every unlawful detention ends with justice. Not every complaint leads to reform. Not every person who experiences this has the resources or energy to fight back through the legal system. But I did, and my fight resulted in accountability for the officer, a substantial settlement, and systemic reforms that will hopefully prevent this from happening to others. Every case that results in accountability makes the system incrementally better. This story is a dramatic retelling based on real-world events and common experiences regarding racial profiling and civil rights violations in the United States. All names, characters, locations, and specific incidents have been changed and fictionalized for this narrative. The purpose of this story is to educate the audience on Fourth Amendment rights, the reality of bias-based policing, and the importance of systemic accountability. It is intended to foster empathy and understanding of the unique challenges faced by marginalized communities, even those who have achieved significant professional and economic success. The most critical takeaway from this story is the importance of knowledge of rights and documentation. Dr. Sterling was able to protect himself not because of his status as a principal, but because he calmly understood his constitutional right to not identify himself without reasonable suspicion of a crime. Furthermore, the existence of objective documentation, the body camera footage, was the deciding factor between his complaint being dismissed as it was in the past and achieving justice. In any interaction with law enforcement, staying calm, knowing the specific laws of your jurisdiction regarding stop and ID, and having a record of the event are your most powerful tools.